In Chapter 7, we're going to talk about metabolism and how our body uses the energy from the nutrients that we ingest to build, repair, and break down our tissues. So what is metabolism? It is the continuous process whereby living organisms or cells will convert the nutrients that we ingest into energy, possibly body structure, or waste. There are two major reactions that happen. There's anabolism, which is to build or synthesize more compounds, complex compounds from what we've ingested, or catabolism, which is the breaking down or splitting apart of those complex substances into simpler substances. In your book on page 122, there is a chart, as you see on this slide, that kind of shows how the body takes in the different macronutrients, such as protein or carbohydrate, and breaks them down into usable forms of energy, or like with protein, it breaks it into amino acids, which are the building blocks for protein. Those can be used for repair and immunity in our body. Fats are important too. Those will break down into the fatty acids that we need and glycerol. And then carbohydrates obviously are the preferred fuel for the glucose that our body needs for energy. The liver plays a really important role in metabolism. It controls lots of the different kinds and quantities of nutrients in our system, and many things are filtered through the liver. Many of the drugs that are used, alcohol, there are lots of things that are filtered through the liver. That's why many times if people are on specific drugs that are filtered through the liver, they have to have liver enzyme tests regularly to make sure that there's no damage being done to the liver over the long haul. The body can store glycogen in the liver, which can be called upon for energy if need be, and can be broken down into glucose and released back into the blood system if more energy is needed. Then there are the kidneys that are also important in metabolism. The kidneys remove waste products from our blood, and it can control many nutrients such as glucose, amino acids, and water. Their main purpose is for filtration and absorption, and they help maintain our nutrient balance in our body. In this image on page 123 in your book, this is kind of showing us the role that insulin plays in that metabolic breakdown of our nutrients. So you can see the picture of the hamburgers and fries and fruit. So we've ingested food. The intestines will absorb the glucose from that meal. The glucose is now circulating in our body, which triggers the pancreas to respond by secreting insulin. What the insulin does is levels out our glucose level in our bloodstream, and it causes the liver and skeletal muscle and other tissues to use that glucose. And once that glucose is used up, then our glucose level returns to normal, or a state of homeostasis. And so that's kind of the cycle. So if you have somebody that is insulin resistant or diabetic, if they're type 1 diabetic, they don't release enough insulin. Their insulin production is hindered in some way. And if you have a type 1 diabetic, their pancreas no longer makes makes the insulin at all, so they don't respond at all. So that's why they have to be on insulin. Carbohydrate metabolism, as you saw in that chart that we were talking about on page 122, is the monosaccharides that we ingest are transported through the liver for glycogenesis, and the liver will convert that into glucose to be used for the body. If we are in a high state, it's called hyperglycemia, and low would be hypoglycemia. And there are certain carbohydrates that have different glycemic indexes. diabetic people really have to pay attention to that, especially with fruits and things like that, because some of the fruits that we eat have a higher glycemic index, meaning that they will change those blood glucose levels more drastically than others. So a diabetic person is going to want to look at that and choose those that don't affect the blood glucose quite as much. What glycogenesis is just the process where sugars, such as fructose from fruit or galactose from milk, sorbitol is an alcohol sugar, sugar alcohol, and so is xylitol, but they are all stored as glycogen in the body, which is that stored form of energy that our body can call upon if we run out of glucose stores. Insulin, again, is the hormone that the pancreas releases in response to glucose levels. Glycemic effect is the rate glucose rises in the bloodstream after a particular food is eaten. And then glucogenesis is the process of your body making glucose from a non-carbohydrate source. Okay, so then protein metabolism. That's where the amino acids are transported again through the portal vein to the liver. There's a constant dynamic state between building and breaking down, or anabolism and catabolism. These are controlled by liver and hormones such as insulin, thyroxine. Growth hormone also stimulates protein synthesis. So our body is in a constant state of trying to maintain homeostasis with the protein levels and catabolism and anabolism. And then there's fat or lipid. Fat is regulated by the liver. In lipogenesis, that is where the body will convert glucose to fat. Lipolysis, anything being lysed is being broken apart. So lipolysis is breaking down the fat. And then oxidation is the process of hydrolyzing the triglycerides to enter that Krebs cycle in order to produce energy from the fat. Alcohol metabolism. It is metabolized primarily in the liver. It has a marked effect, as we know, on our blood and blood pressure. It increases the risk of hypertension when it's used in an abundance. It can be toxic if it's consumed in an excessive amount. The dietary guidelines advise moderation in alcohol consumption. 1 drink for a woman per day, and that 1 drink would consist of a 12-ounce beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of an 80 proof spirit such as vodka constitutes 1 drink, and no more than 2 drinks a day for men. So 2 beers, 2 small glasses of wine. That is what they consider moderation. And this the benefits of alcohol, they have proven to really only benefit kind of the middle-aged adult. So an excessive intake of any nutrient can result in excess energy being stored as fat. So whether it is a carbohydrate or it is a fruit, vegetable, alcohol, it doesn't matter. It's calories that calories in, calories out. So if my diet consists completely of carbohydrates, any bit of that in excess can be stored as fat in my body. Fat is a good source of energy because remember it's 9 kilocalories per gram. But carbohydrate is the preferred fuel because it's easily converted to glucose by the body and used for fuel. The breakdown of all of the different classes of food involve that Krebs cycle, and that is how our body produces ATP for energy. Each nutrient has its specific function, and all of them must be present simultaneously for us to have the most benefit from our nutrients. So that's why we always talk about using a variety of foods and eating from all the different food groups, and different colors of fruits and vegetables are important for our bodies to get what it needs. Again, a chart. I like these charts because they kind of simplify things for us. The metabolic pathway of excess energy intake. Basically, if you look at this, anything, like I said, that you take in that is in excess, be it lettuce, carrots, or Snicker bar, can be stored as adipose tissue if we are over consuming. A kilocalorie is, they use kilocalorie and calories interchangeably throughout the book. It's 1,000 times larger than a calorie, although they do use them interchangeably. It is the amount of heat that is required to increase the temperature of 1 kilogram of water 1 degree Celsius. That is what a kilocalorie is defined as. Carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and even alcohol provide energy for humans. Know the different energy values that are provided by each macronutrient. So protein and carbohydrates are both 4 calories per gram or kilocalories per gram, and fat is 9 kilocalories per gram, and alcohol is 7. So you definitely want to know the energy values for your macronutrients. The measurement of potential energy is the amount of energy or calories available in a food. It can be, in your book they show a calorimeter, calorimeter. It is, they place a weighted amount of food inside of this little contraption, and as that food is burned, there's an increase in water temperature, which indicates the amount of heat that food gives off, which is its potential energy. So that's how they figure out calories in foods. And here is a picture of the calorimeter, I guess is how I would say that. ATP is also known as adenosine triphosphate. It is the instant source of energy for the body. It allows us to do mechanical work. It allows our body to transport nutrients and waste products. It is important for the synthesis of compounds that are generated from that Krebs cycle, which is carbon dioxide, water, and energy. It measured in units called ATP units, and it's the high energy phosphate compounds that we get from this process. The basic metabolic rate is the energy that is required for all of our involuntary physiologic functions, what we need our body to be able to do just to maintain life. So respiration, circulation, maintenance of tone and temperature of our body. So that is the basic metabolic rate. Again, this chart kind of shows you what we were talking about, calories in, calories out. So if I'm trying to maintain weight, I want those numbers to be even. If I want to lose weight, I need to burn more calories than I'm eating or consuming. And if I want to gain weight, obviously I need more calories and then are being burned off. Factors that can affect my basic metabolic rate are sleep. So your BMR is lowest after a few hours of sleep because your body is completely relaxed. The BMR is highest in babies from birth to 2 years old because you think about all of the growth and activity that their body is going through at that time. In pregnancy, the BMR increases 15 to 30% during that last trimester because that's when the baby is really growing. The more body surface area a person has, the greater their BMR. The state of health, if your body is in a poor state of health and constantly trying to repair, that's going to affect your BMR, your composition and gender. Are you more muscle? Are you more fat? The chemical messengers in our endocrine glands can affect BMR. Sometimes people have thyroid deficiency, and that is one of the big endocrine glands that controls our metabolism. So if that gets out of whack, then that can affect our BMR and can drop the BMR and people can put on weight, or if it's the other way around and it's overproducing, then it can increase the BMR. The temperature and whether you're in a state of fast or starvation. Basal energy expenditure are the calories necessary to not only maintain your basal metabolic rate, but also additional calories would then be needed for the thermic effect of eating and digesting, voluntary activities, if I'm going to walk, jump, run, those kinds of things, and an increased need for catabolic processes. The thermic effect of food is that increased energy expenditure that I was just speaking of that results from the consumption of food. So it's the number of calories needed for digestion. How do we calculate BMR? BMR can be calculated very easy. You just take 10 times your ideal weight. So if my ideal weight was 150 pounds, I would take that times 10, and that would give me a pretty good idea of how many calories I would need to maintain my weight, which would be 1,500 per day. The most variable factor that affects our energy needs is muscle activity. So if you are referring to the MyPlate, choosemyplate.gov, they have all kinds of different recommendations in their guidelines for physical activity. They recommend 2.5 hours per week of a moderate intensity activity. Leisure time physical activity has been associated with lower risks of cancer. So if you're working with patients that are maybe elderly or maybe physically impaired in some way, they still can get benefit from doing more of a leisure type activity. Even if they can't go run, jog, do aerobics, or some of the things that we think of when we think of working out, getting out for a leisurely stroll or even just doing things in a seated position with light weights, different things like that can be just as effective and helpful for them. The estimated energy requirement is that daily caloric intake that is needed to maintain our energy balance for healthy individuals of a specific age, gender, weight, height, and level of activity. So these levels are recommended to sustain body weight. The BMI, we would like to maintain our BMI at 22 to 25. Anything over 25 is considered overweight. So that's what we like to try to encourage. Caloric intake should equal the amount of energy needed for body processes and physical activity for weight maintenance. Like that chart that we saw earlier, calories in, calories out. If those are approximately the same, we're going to maintain weight. Many healthy patients are able to control energy intake and balance their output with very little effort, but some of us have to work a little bit harder at that. Hunger is regulated by a complex network of factors, and it's hunger and appetite that can greatly affect weight balance in patients. So when you're working with a patient on if they do reach out to you for weight control, you definitely want to try to steer them in the direction of healthier options, but get them involved as to what foods they like and will enjoy, or otherwise they're not going to stick with it. The factors that help or affect this energy balance, the hypothalamus is the controlling center of hunger, and it's found in the middle of the brain. Different things that will also trigger hunger is the distension of stomach. So if a patient is eating and they eat too fast, they will consume more calories than they need to actually be satisfied, because they don't give their body enough time to send those signals to trigger that they are full. So distension of the stomach is one of them. And when the stomach starts to get full, it results in these inhibitory signals that will then suppress that feeding center or the hypothalamus, and it actually reduces your desire to eat. Also, if you're eating a meal that has fat, when fat hits the duodenum of the small intestine, that's another trigger to our body that we're getting full and to stop eating. And there are hormonal secretions such as ghrelin, leptin, and serotonin that can all affect our desire to eat and let our bodies know when we're full. Appetite is affected by the fact that eating is rewarding and makes us feel good. So hunger is actually our bodies, the hypothalamus in the body telling us we need food. Appetite is that desire to eat, and it is affected by what makes us feel good, and we treat ourselves with food. The greater weight means that the individual is responding to feelings or emotions rather than actual hunger. Many times boredom and stress, as we all know, are factors that can frequently affect eating habits of obese individuals. So sometimes it's a matter of finding something for them to do that will give them satisfaction, make them happy, and feel good rather than eating. Exercise is a good thing to replace that if you can get a patient motivated to do so. Obese women, this is kind of interesting, the energy expenditure. Obese women have a similar or higher metabolic rate than thinner women. Remember, we talked about surface area. The more surface area, the greater the basal metabolic rate. But because of differences in their composition, because many obese women obviously have more fat, the BMR affects the energy expenditure for various activities. So because of their body composition, they don't burn as effectively as somebody that's more muscle than fat. An increased physical activity is needed to balance that intake, and studies have shown that the use of pedometers can result in a significant increase in the number of steps per week. I am a true believer in this. I am constantly looking at my pedometer to see how many steps I've gotten. I try to shoot for 10,000 steps a day. At minimum 5, just to get up and get moving and do the things that we need to do. But 10,000 is a good goal to set for a day. For somebody that was a beginner, that might be a bit much, but for the average adult, I think that's a good goal to reach. An inadequate energy intake would be a deficiency in the energy, and this, or energy meaning calories. This could result in a depressed rate of growth in children, and it can also result in weight loss in adults. Intentional weight loss may be helpful or harmful depending on how a patient is going about that. Starvation is never a good thing. That's just going to break down muscle and break down the body and not be, sometimes even the body systems will start to fail or not work efficiently because of starvation diet. So it's really important to encourage people to eat properly. An inadequate energy intake may result in malnutrition. Inadequate intake can also cause a downward spiral with the metabolic imbalances, decrease in hunger, which can then become life-threatening if the patient doesn't receive proper treatment.